All right, we are ready to start the assembly of our Fractured Star quilt. And just before we do that, I just want to go over the bagging just to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So you should have bags 1, 2, and 3. Have your diamond unit, so your unit A. There should be 8 in each bag, and then we have the fabrics that go in with that. So you should have 3 of those bags ready to sew. And that's the wonderful thing about setting up these patterns this way, is when we pick up one of these bags, and it doesn't matter if it's 1, 2, or 3, they're all exactly the same, done the same way, is everything in the bag is ready, is what you need to do the unit. So you don't have to start going through things and figuring out what goes in here and what do I need for this unit. It's all here. So if you happen to have time to cut your quilt and then you have to put it aside for a week or 2 or 3 or 6, when you're coming back to your project, it's ready to pick up and go. You don't have to do any more figuring. Everything in the bag is what you need to do that unit. So you should have 3 of those bags, and then we had set up a bag for the borders. So you should have your ombre border, the little border, and then we had cut the outside border out of the dark fabric. So that should be in your other bag, as well as the extra fabric of your dark fabric or your light fabric, whatever you're using for the binding, should also be in this bag. And then we had our background pieces. That's the template pieces that we cut at the end. So that should be in a bag as well. And then I have, my last bag is for the extra pieces. And this is a bag that I talked about, but I didn't actually set up on video in front of you. So in here I have my extra pieces of fabric that we had from cutting out our ombre strips. That's our strips from 1 to 15. So I kept my labels on there, my 1 to 15 labels on the actual strips. This way, if we need to repair or fix something at some point, you can go right back to that strip and we'll use that fabric to do that. And then you have your extra ombre fabric, which was the middle piece between your lightest and your darkest fabric. So this is in your last bag, and I just have this labeled extra fabric for my quilt Fractured Star, and I leave this with my quilt, the other bags, which I'll put in the bin if I'm not sewing it right away. This way, if I need this fabric at some point during the assembly or the making of the quilt, it's there for me to use. If I put it in with my other stash or my other fabrics, chances are I'll use it for something else, and then when I go to quilt this quilt or make this quilt, I'll need a piece and I won't have it. So that's why I leave that with my quilt. Okay, so having talked about that, I am going to put away my borders, background, and extra fabric bags. We won't need those right away. We're going to start sewing on our bags 1, 2, and 3, and we just need 1. So I'm just going to start with bag 1, and I'll put 2 and 3 to the side. And I will take everything out of the bag. So in your bag, you should have your 8 papers, Unit A papers. You'll have your ombre pieces that we cut. And then you'll have your Unit A strip template sheets 1, 2, and 3. And these we still need to cut, so we hadn't cut these yet, and I tend not to cut those until we actually start doing the assembly of the unit. This way your pieces just stay nicer. It's better than having a lot of little pieces floating around in your bag, especially if they're going to sit for a bit. So I just do this as I'm ready to start the unit. So the first thing we're going to do is cut these apart. So I'm just going to grab my add a quarter ruler, and this is something that I do. It's not in the pattern. It's just a little thing that I do. I use my add a quarter ruler to cut my template sheets apart. I have a paper clip on here. I've got a lip on my ruler, which is about the same thickness as the paper clip. So when I put my ruler down with the lip down on the cut line, that lip compensates for the thickness of my paper clip, so my ruler will not wobble on the clip as it will if you're just using a flat ruler. There'll be a lot more give on your paper clip. So make sure your lip is down. And if you look at my first sheet here, which is sheet number 2, you're going to cut these on the solid lines here, and at the very end it'll say cut line 1, cut line 2, and we're just going to cut those in numerical order. So we got a cut line 1, cut line 2, and we have a cut line 3 over here. So we want to cut them in order, because if you don't cut them in order, you start with 3, you're going to cut through sections 1 and 2. So you want to cut these in numerical order. So we're going to start with number 1. So I'm just cutting right on that line. I'm going to grab my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to cut these apart. So that's 1. This is cut line number 2. So now I can move these 2 away and do my cut line number 3. All right, so I'm just going to put these here, and I'll do the same thing with this sheet, layout number 1. So again, in this one we have 2 cut lines, cut line 1 and cut line 2. So again, I'm going to start with 1 and right on the line. You can, and I'm cutting through 8 layers here, and you can see I'm not having any issues, but you have to make sure your blade's sharp. If your blade is pretty dull, you're gonna find that you're sawing through the fabric, and you're gonna have to press a lot harder. All right, so that is that. So this is sheet number, that was sheet number 1. And this is sheet number 3. So again, we're going to cut these in order. And again, this one only has the 2, so 1 and 2. So I'm just going to cut on cut line 1 and on cut line 2. All right. So now that I have these cut out, we're now going to stack our pieces in order. And this part here is all in your Fractured Star pattern from Judy. On page number 5, she goes through the stacking of your pieces at the bottom left of the page number 5. And then on the right hand side, she goes through the actual process of paper piecing, which I'll go through with you at this time. But when you go and read through this again, once you've seen it visually, this makes a lot more sense, easier to understand. All right, so we're going to stack our fabrics first. So what you need to know before you start stacking is how many pieces we have. So if you look at your Unit A paper, you just need to go and find the last section. This is section 16. We got 14, 15, and 17. So 17 is our last section. So it means we have 17 pieces. So that means we're going to start stacking from 17 down to section 1. So I'm going to find my section 17, which is one of these long ones. I'm going to start stacking up here so I have more room. I'm going to move these over here for now. And I'm actually going to do it over here so I have more room to cut. So you're noticing here that I have my sew side at the top. That's very important when you're stacking your pieces, that your sew sides are all at the top, because that's the side that you're going to be lining up with the side that we're trimming. So after 17, we're going down to 16. So I'm going to find my section 16, which is another long one. And 15, and then you need 14, which is this guy, and then 13, which is this one. So again, sew side up. Then we have 12 and 11. Sew side up, and 10, 9. So again, when I'm looking at my numbers here, you're looking for section 9, which is right on your paper. And then 8 and 7 and 6, 5 and 4, 3, 2, and 1 does not have a sew side. That's the only piece that doesn't have a sew side, and that's the one that has an exception to the rule. So we're going to start with section number 1, and before I do that, I am going to just press my papers flat without steam, just to get all the creases and wrinkles out of them. Alright, so we're going to find section number 1, which is going to be this guy right here. So your diamond right at the bottom of your diamond. So we're going to take section number 1 and you're going to flip the whole stack upside down. Like that. And we're going to turn it this way. So that's the same shape as your diamond right here. I'm going to take my paper clip out and I'm just going to leave my paper there so that I know how to orient my pieces. And I'm just going to separate them because we cut these in a bit of a stack, so we're going to just separate them so we don't sew 2 together or glue 2 together. So I'm just going to slide this one down like this, and you're going to lift your paper up and you're going to put the wrong side of your paper to the wrong side of your fabric. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm on. So you want to make sure that you have fabric beyond the dashed line right here, which shows you your quarter seam allowance. And I can just feel that my edges are right here and right here, so I know that I'm beyond those points. Okay. Another way to do that is just to put your finger on that line, flip up, and if there's fabric beyond that, then you know that you're okay. I'm good here, I'm good here, and I'm good there. So once you've placed it in the proper place, you're going to take your glue stick and you're just going to glue right in the center of your section. So like that. You're going to glue that and you're just going to place that like that. And we're going to glue all of them before we do anything else. So I'm just going to glue mine. So again, I'm just making sure I have fabric everywhere. The other thing you can do is if you have a clear table, you can put this on top of your table like this. Put your phone underneath with a flashlight, which creates a light box. Then you can see where your piece is exactly. My table is solid, so I can't do that with this one. But a lot of the tables for the machines are clear, so that's another little trick that you can use to do that. And of course, there's always the old lifting it up to the light trick, which works too. All right, once you have them all glued, so you'll have your stack like this. This paper now we're done with, so you're just going to leave that to the side. And I keep my papers until I'm actually done the whole bag, in case I end up cutting something I'm not supposed to. You have that as a template to recut a piece, okay? So the next step is to trim. So I'm going to grab my first paper here. So what you need at this point on your table, you should have your glue stick, your cutter, your templates, and your add a quarter rulers. And I'm going to start with my smaller add a quarter ruler and my smaller template. And I'm going to find line number 1, which is right here. So I'm going to put my template right on the solid line, line number 1, that's the one that's labeled. And you're going to fold against your template. Then I'm going to trim that off. And then I'm just going to remove my template and I'm going to stack my pieces so you can see I'm leaving my paper folded and the part that I've trimmed is at the top here. Do that for all of my papers. So you can see here that we're doing things in 8s. So every step you do 8 times before you move on to the next one. So on the line, I'm folding my paper against my template and I'm trimming. And depending on how you've placed your diamond, this piece is going to be small, a little bit fatter or a little bit skinnier. You just, as long as you've put your diamond to cover the whole unit, it doesn't matter. Okay. So again, line number 1. I'm going to fold and trim. Remove your template, keep your paper folded, and put your sew side up. So I'm going to quickly do mine. All right, now that we have that number 1 section trimmed, we're going to add our second piece before we sew. So we're going to bring this back over here. Let me move my things out of the way here. And I'm going to take my second section, so section number 2. And again, this pile stays right side up, so don't flip this one upside down. I'm just going to put my paper here to remind me that my sew side goes here. And again, I am just going to separate these. So I'm leaving these right side up. I'm just starting from the back and just separating them. So again, we should have 8 pieces here. And these one in particular, because we did cut through the 8 layers at a time, they tend to stick together, so it's helpful to separate them like this. All right, so again, we're just going to slide this down like this. Then you're going to pick up your paper and you're going to line up your 2 sew sides. So again, your sew sides at the top, and the side that we trimmed here, it becomes your sew side. So we're going to line up those 2 sew sides together. So what we need to figure out here is exactly where to put this on this strip. So if you just open up your paper for a second, I'll just show you where the section is. So we're adding section number 2. So that's this section right here. So the solid line around section 2 designates the finished size of your piece. So we need to make sure that we add a quarter on all 4 sides of that piece. And that's what the dashed lines are for. So they show you the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you have to make sure that you have fabric beyond the dashed lines around that piece. So the easiest way to do that is to grab a seam ripper or a pair of scissors like this. Find your finished size. So my point most left of my piece is right here. And I'm going to go a 1/4 inch beyond and up, which will bring me right here. So I'm just going to put a hole through that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. So this is the rightmost point on this section. So again, I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch beyond and make a hole there. So when I turn my paper back upside down, those 2 holes need to be on top of the piece that I'm adding. So if I look here, if I put my finger here and lift up my light fabric in my paper, I can see that I'm on my fabric, my black fabric, my blue fabric. And again on this side, if I lift all of this up, I can see that I have fabric beyond that hole. So that means I'm good to go. So I can see here that visually that I have placed my light fabric about in the center of my piece that I'm adding, which is my dark fabric. So once I know that I've got this one right, I know that instead of making holes on all of my papers like I just did on this one, I know that if I put it in the center, I should be good to go for all 8 pieces. So at this point, you can pick this up and go sew on line number 1. So you would open up your piece and sew on line number 1. Or you can pick up your glue stick, lift up your light fabric, and just touch the very edge of the piece that you're adding and glue those edges together and make a stack over here. That enables me to glue them all again, so I do all 8, and then I'll go sew all 8 instead of sewing, then coming back, sewing and coming back. And that is what I called flow. For everybody has a different flow of how they work. There's no right or wrong way to do this. If you're more comfortable setting one up and then sewing it, that's totally fine. I like to do things in batches, so I will just glue all of mine. And you don't need to glue. I mean, I could easily just set these up beside me on my sewing machine over here and then just sew through. But I find when you're first starting, it's one less thing to worry about. You know your piece will not move on you when you're sewing, especially when your pieces get longer. So again, you can see that I'm not putting a lot of glue here. It's just enough just to hold it. All right, I've got all of mine sewn, or glued, sorry. So I'm just gonna move them back down here, and I'm gonna get myself ready to sew. So when you're paper piecing, just a reminder, I like to use an open-toed foot. I'll be sewing with a 1.8 or a 2.0 stitch length. And you want to make sure that you have a brand new needle in your machine before you start a project like this. For paper piecing, I like to use the Microtex 10 or 12 needle, or 80 or 90. Okay, so then we're going to start sewing. So again, when you start sewing here, we're going to be sewing on line number 1. I like to start 2 or 3 stitches above my line, and I like to sew 2 or 3 stitches beyond my line. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. Do this. Yeah. And I'm just cutting in between mine here right now, just because the papers are big, but you can definitely chain them through. And again, you're sewing on the solid line. So this is how you would chain them through. You just bring this through like that and then set up your next one. But again, because the papers are so big, it's not really an advantage to do that, but that's how you would do it. All right, I've got all of mine sewn on line number 1. So the next step now is to press. So I'm going to grab all my papers. And to press, you're just going to flip your pieces, your papers upside down. So like this, and you're just going to push this over and press. So I'm going to do that. All right, I have my pieces pressed. So now I'm going to trim again. So I'm going to bring my pieces back here, and I am trimming on line number 2. So my line number 2 is right here. So my paper has to be sitting this way. I'm going to grab my fold template again, and I'm going to put it on the solid line that's labeled line number 2. And again, I'm just going to fold against the template, tuck my add a quarter ruler up against that fold so your lip is down, so it tucks nice and firm in there, and then you're just going to trim. And again, you're just going to move all that away, take your template out, and you're just going to stack with your sew side up again, leaving your paper folded. And I'm just going to slide my next one over. Solid line number 2, folding against, and stacking them up like that. So you're going to do that to all 8. All right, we've got them all trimmed. Now we're going to add our section number 3. So again, I'm just going to move these back here. I'm going to move my section 2 up there. We're done with that. Remove my paper clip. And again, I'm just going to move my paper up, leaving my sew side up. Make sure your pieces stay so that they're sitting exactly like your paper pieces here with the sew side up. And I'm just going to separate them out like this. All right, and again, you're just going to slide the first one down, pick up your paper, and line up your sew sides. So again, we need to figure out exactly where to place that diamond. So I'm just going to grab my seam ripper, and I'm looking at the solid line is the finished size of my section 3. So I'm going to move over the 1/4 inch over to the left and up, and make a hole right there. And again to the right, 1/4 inch over to the dash line, and make a hole. So I want to make sure that I'm on. So you can see here that I'm just past here, and this side we have lots, so we could actually just move over a little bit here. So we've got lots here, and when I fold this over to the, I'm a little bit over on that side too. So as long as you've got fabric beyond, the fabric that you're adding is beyond those lines, then you're good to go. So I could probably come over just a little bit more, and again, I'm just going to glue those edges together. And just stack them up there. So I'm going to bring my next piece down, and again, I'm just going to set this up. So if you're not sure, you can make your hole again here. So again, solid line, 1/4 inch over. And as long as you're about 1/4 inch past on this right side, So if I fold this over like that, I'm 1/4 inch past, you'll have lock on the other side. So I'm just going to make sure that this side is good, and then just glue. Stack them up, leaving your sew sides at the top. Bring your next one down, and then just bring this down here. And once you're okay with where it's supposed to be, you don't have to make that line, or that hole, I mean, and you can just go ahead and glue. Alright, so once we're glued, we're going to go sew on line number 2. Your paper can come back here. And I'm just going to grab these and bring them down closer to me. So we're sewing on line number 2. So again, so line number 2 is parallel to line number 1. You're starting above your line and you're sewing below your line. Okay. Alright, so once you're done sewing line number 2, you're going to take your papers again, flip them upside down, and we're just going to press this unit over, just like that. So I'm just going to do that right now. So just a reminder, when you're pressing, paper piecing, pressing is probably the most important step, because if you don't press your pieces over nice and snug against your sew line, you're going to have give in that section. So pressing is very important in paper piecing. If you have give once you've taken your paper off, you're going to be changing the shape of your piece. We've done pressing, so I'm just going to show you that again for the pressing. So when I'm saying snug against your seam, when you pull this, there's no give in here whatsoever. It's nice and snug. If you're not pressed over snug and you can just pull that away like that, it means it's not pressed tight enough. Okay, very important, whether you're paper piecing or not, but especially in paper piecing, because once you take that paper off, if this has give in it, it makes your piece bigger, so that you'll have some play in that area. All right, now we are moving on to line number 3. So once you've sewn and pressed a line, you move on to the next one. So line number 3, we're switching sides, so we're just going to change the way your paper is sitting here. I'm just going to slide this over like this. Again, you can grab your full template, so just be aware here, your line number 3 is now longer, so you want to trim on line number 3, which is going to be the solid line. And this time, instead of just bringing the paper over, bring up paper and fabric against your full template. Fold that, then grab where everything's joining here. You're just going to grab that and then just rip it off like a band-aid. Okay, so it's just gonna, because we've sewn beyond the line, which is what you want. We're creating a diamond. We're creating a crisscross there, so it has to, the seams have to cross. And also, because we sewed beyond the line, when I go to trim now, I'm trimming off all those long pieces of thread, so you don't have to go back and do that. So we're just going to trim that off, and again, move your ruler away. Let your fold template out, and we're just going to put this up here, sew side up like that. So again, we're going to move this over. So we want line number 3. So on the solid line, paper and fabric up. Just press or fold that against your fold template. Make sure you hold nice and firm with your left hand. Grab the fabric here and just rip it off. If you rip your paper, that's fine. There's not, that's not going to do anything. And then trim. And just keep stacking them up like that. So we're going to do that to all 8 papers. All right, we're done trimming our 8 pieces. So now we're going to add section number 4. So I'm just going to bring these back down here. So again, we're going to take the next piece in our pile here, take the paper clip off, put our paper up at the top. And again, I'm just going to separate these. So again, make sure these stay right side up. Don't turn them upside down. And again, I'm just separating these because I find every time I don't, I end up picking up 2 and sewing 2 onto my paper, then I have to rip it off. So I just find it faster to do it this way. All right, so sew sides at the top. So again, we're just going to bring our first piece down, bring your paper on top, and again is to find that placement. And for these, it's pretty easy because we've cut these longer to begin with, so we have a lot of leeway. So just to go through that process again. So section 4, again, the solid line shows you the finished size of that piece. So we're going to find the leftmost point, which is down here, go over 1/4 of an inch to the dashed line, make a hole, and the rightmost point, solid line, and add your 1/4 to the top and to the side, and make a hole. And then you bring this back down. You can see my hole is right here, and I've got lots of fabric. You can just see it from here beyond, and the same thing here. I've got lots beyond this way. So again, if I'm just putting this right in the center of my strip, I know I'm good to go for all of these. So I'm just going to grab my glue stick again, and as these are getting longer, you'll find this little glue stick trick really neat, because you know that your piece is not going to go to the left or to the right when you're sewing. So I'm just going to put this here, bring down the next one. So I'm just putting it in the center of my piece that I'm adding, and then just gluing. It doesn't take a lot of glue. All right, now that we've glued our pieces on, we're just going to move over to the sewing machine, and we're now going to sew on line number 3. So again, just remember this line goes from up here to down here. So again, I'm just going to start above, and I'm going to sew below that line. Make sure you're sewing on the whole line. People have tendency to stop right here. Don't do that. You need to sew that whole line, okay? All right, we're done sewing our line number 3. So now again, we're just going to flip our papers upside down, and again, you're just pressing your piece over like that. So I'm going to go and press mine. All right, we've got our pieces pressed, so now we're going to flip these back this way again, and we're moving on to line number 4. So again, we're just going to trim. So you're going to put your fold template on line number 4. And this time there's no crisscrossing, so you just need to bring up just the paper. We're trimming, taking the ruler and the fold template away, and we're just going to stack those up this way. You can put this paper up here. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim all of my 8 pieces. All right, we're done trimming line number 4, so now we're going to add our 5th section. So we're going to bring this down again, remove our paper clip, bring our paper up to the top, make sure sew side is at the top, and your fabric should be sitting the same way as your paper. And again, I'm just going to take the time to separate these out. And again, you should be sitting right side up. So again, we're just going to slide that piece down, and we're just going to line up our sew sides. And again, we're just going to go over the process here of figuring out what this piece is supposed to be. So again, section 5, your solid line is your finished size. So you want to find a 1/4 of an inch beyond that. So a 1/4 inch to the left. You're going to make a hole there, and then find your solid point at the rightmost point on your right hand side, and again 1/4 of an inch to the side, to the right and above. So if I bring this down, what you want to make sure here is that those 2 points are on top of your fabric. So you can see this one, my edge is right here, so I have lots here, and I also have lots right here. So if I bring this over, I have fabric on that side. So you can just glue that on. It's a little harder to do because we're to see. Once it's glued, you set that aside and bring it upside down. And you can kind of see through the paper here where your next, the shaded side is coming down. So that can be kind of an indication too. If you don't want to keep poking, you can see that I've got lots of room here, and again here I've got lots of room. So you can see through the paper as well where it's supposed to be. But if you need to make those holes, definitely make the holes so that you get it right the first time. All right, I've got my pieces ready to sew, so I'm just going to bring these closer to me. And now we're sewing on line number 4. So again, it's a long line, same size as your line number 3. You're sewing above your line and coming down below your line. All right, we are done sewing on line number 4. So again, you're just going to flip your papers upside down, and you're just going to press this piece over like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. right, we're done pressing our line number 4, so now we're going to carry on and trim on line number 5. All right, we've got our section 13 pressed, so now we're going to carry on with our section 14. So that means we need to find line 13. So you can see here that we've actually finished putting on the color on our diamond. So we have the full gradation of our ombre on our diamond. So basically what we have left to do is to put the 4 dark strips in this scenario, they're dark, around the diamond. So we're just going to turn this over again and find line 13. So you can see here, line 13 is here and line 14 is here. So we've been doing one line at a time. I'm just going to introduce a little, what I call a shortcut, because every time you can do something twice and go to your sewing machine again once, and it just speeds up the process. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. If you're not comfortable with that, you just do one line at a time like we've been doing. But I'm just going to show this for those of you who are willing to try that. So what you're going to do is trim on line 13. So this one has some crisscrosses here. So you're going to have right here. So you're going to have to bring up your paper and your fabric again here. Holding your paper down with your left hand, and with your right hand you're just going to rip that off and trim. Like that. So we're just going to do line 13 first and set that one up. So we're going to do all of our 13s here first. So go ahead and do that on all of your papers. Alright, so before I go and glue my section 14 on, I'm just going to flip my whole stack around, because my line 14 is on the opposite side of my line 13. So I can do that. If that line 14 would have been beside, you would not be able to do this. So because my line 13 is here and on the opposite side is 14, I'm able to do this. I'm just going to trim my 14 right away. So this one has a bunch of crisscrosses here because our sashing is running through all these pieces. So you're just going to have to rip all these pieces off like that. And touch your ruler in. And we're going to restack, making sure that your line 13 is at the top here. Okay, so I've got those 2 sides trimmed. And again, you want to make sure at this point that you have your line 13 at the top. So just quickly go through your pile, make sure it's line 13 at the top here. And you have them all. So you're going to bring down your section 14, sew side at the top, and we're just going to separate these. Bring this down, and then just bring your paper up. So this one is really easy. As long as the piece that's upside down is fully on top of the piece that you're adding. So that means that all of this has to be on top, and this one's all is down here. So you've got lots of room here. You're good to go. So you're just going to glue that together. Alright, I'm going to go and sew those before I glue on my section 15. again, we're sewing above the line and below the line down here. Alright, we're done sewing line 13, but because we've already trimmed 14, we're just going to turn our papers this way to line 14 at the top and bring down our section 15 and set that one up. And I'm just going to show you how to do this without the glue at this point. You've been using the glue all the way through. I'm just going to show you how I would do this without the glue. Since our strips are longer, it's a little bit more difficult, but I'm just going to separate these out. So especially important to keep your strips separated here when you're doing it this way, because if you won't find out you've sewn 2 strips in together until you've come down to your last paper, because you're doing one paper at a time instead of gluing them all like we've been doing. So it's important to make sure you've got your 8 pieces here before you start. So again, your first one, you're going to bring down, you're going to bring this on top. And again, make sure that the paper that's upside down, so this piece right here, is fully on top of the piece that you're adding. So I can see my dark on this side and on this side, so I know that I've got full coverage of the piece that I'm adding. So if you're not gluing, you would just then take this to your table. And again, you're sewing a long line here, so you're starting above and you're going to go below. So what I do is start a couple stitches and just peek underneath and make sure that that strip that I'm adding is exactly where it's supposed to be, and then carry on. So you don't want to move that strip too much once you're at least halfway down your piece, because it can create a little bit of a bind or a pucker if you move it too much at that point. You want to make sure that you do that right when you're starting at the top. I'm just going to put that one to the side, so I'll grab my next piece. I'm just going to bring it onto my table and carry on sewing my next strips. So again, just sewing a few stitches, then I'm just peeking underneath, making sure my strip is in line with the piece that I've trimmed. All right, we're done sewing those 2 lines. So now we're just going to turn our stack upside down again. This is going to go under here. And now we're going to be pressing our line 13 and our line 14 over like that. So you're going to have 2 sides to press at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. All right, we're done pressing, so we're going to flip our stack upside down again, and we're moving on to line 15. So again, I'm going to cut both of my lines right away. So I'll do 15 first, and then I'll turn my stack and do 16. And again, if you're more comfortable working one line at a time, that's totally fine. Everybody works differently. It's just a little tip that I throw in for those of you who want to do the 2 at the same time. And again, the only reason we can do that is because the lines are parallel to one another. If they would be side by side, crisscrossing one another, you definitely would not be able to do that. So line 15 is over here. So we're just going to have one crisscross here at the top. So as you can see here, my fold template is a little bit short. So if you've got a longer one, that's perfect. If not, you can just slide it down like I'm doing here. Then grab your add a quarter ruler, tuck that in, and trim. All right. All right, I've done trimming my line 15, so now I'm just going to take my stack, flip it over, and do my last side, which is line 16. And again, put your line 15 back up at the top, because that's the side that we're going to sew first. All right, we're done trimming our 2 lines, and again, we're just going to make sure that our line 15 is at the top over here, and line all set with this one. So those are all 15. So we're going to bring down our 15, or section 16, and again, sew side at the top. And again, I'm just going to separate mine because I'm not going to glue mine again. So I'm just going to separate to make sure I've got my 8 pieces. So again, just to set this up, you're going to take your first strip, and again, you're putting the paper that's upside down needs to be fully on top of your piece that you're adding, so you need to see some on both sides here. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those ones. All right, we've sewn our line 15. I'm just going to tuck this under here. And our last piece is section 17. And again, I'm just going to separate mine. So before I go press this last piece I've just sewed on, I'm just going to sew on my last piece, which is section 17. So I'm just going to turn my papers around so that my line 16 is at the top now. And I'm just going to show you how to set that one up again. So same as the other ones, we're just going to make sure that the paper that's upside down is fully on top of the strip that we're adding. So you see fabric on either side of the paper here. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and sew that, and then I'll be right back. All right, we are done sewing our unit A. So now that we've done all of our sections, these papers are no longer needed, so these can just go into your recycle bucket. And we're going to turn our papers over and press the last 2 pieces that we've sewn over like that and like that, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm done pressing for unit A1. So this is what your unit should look like in whatever color you've chosen to do yours in. So the next step now is to turn your paper over again and to trim on the very outside line of your unit. So we have just finished bag number 1. I would not trim any of these until I'm actually done my 3rd bag and ready to start doing the assembly. And the only reason I do that is as soon as you start cutting very like to the very edge here, you're cutting your sewing very trim. So if these get jostled around, or if it takes you a few months to get your project done and they're all trimmed and in your bag and they get kind of bounced around, this can start unraveling. If you don't trim it, because we've sewn above and below the lines, there's less chance of that happening, and it'll stay together a lot better. So I would just put, these would all go back into your bag number 1. So you're just going to pull out your bag number 1 and put these all back in, and then carry on to bags 2 and 3. But just because you're just going to repeat watching this video for bag 2 and 3, I'm going to show you how to do that trim right away. So once you have finished your 2nd and 3rd bag, you're going to trim all of your units. So you're just going to take a straight edge. It can be this, your add a quarter ruler, or you can use another ruler, straight edge, doesn't really matter. If you're using the Creative Grids, there's a little bit more grip, so it won't slide as easily. So you're just going to put your ruler on the very outside edge of your unit, and you're trimming right on that line. So you're going to go all the way around. And you can see here that this corner has been cut off, and that's what we call a smart corner. So you want to do those trims. So that will matter when we go do the assembly. And I can't stress enough, trim on the very outside line. If you trim on the inside line, you're going to have to re-add a piece because you've cut off your seam allowance. Alright, so I'm playing that one, and I'm just going to do these little funny corners here. Alright, so this is what it should look like when you're done trimming. And of course it looks beautiful once you've trimmed it. And that's what you need to do for bags 1, 2, and 3. Just make sure that when you're done a bag that you put them back in the same bag they came out of. Just because of the ombre situation, it'll matter where they're going in the layout. So these will all go back into your bag number 1. And have fun sewing 2 and 3. And I'll be back when I'm done mine.